Hi, welcome. This is Tom. This is characters and plots and strips and just how to make your comics personal. Um, it's a kind of a distillation of How to Say Everything, which is a book. It's like that book's 190 pages or something. This is a quick sort of, I don't know, sort of like distillation of some of those ideas. There's going to be a couple exercises. There's going to be a couple diversions that I think are important to storytelling that don't come up much. But mostly it's going to be about taking things that are personal and sort of making them your own. So before we start, on an index card, write down the thing most distracting you away from your art at this moment. I say lost keys, work troubles, war in Afghanistan, family drama, whatever. We've done things like this before in our class. And it's probably different, the thing distracting you, unless it's the pandemic, which I'll let you decide. Second thing, write down something that generally obsesses you but doesn't distract you. So it's the thing you really like, the thing you're passionate about: gardening, music, the state of the environment, the history of China, color, whatever. And for me, I'm going to make some examples. The thing distracting me is the fact that I'm recording this while there's other stuff going on behind me, so I'm trying to be quiet, or I'm hoping I don't get interrupted. That's the thing distracting me. The thing that generally interests me or obsesses me or whatever, I'm going to say, a lot of you know that I'm obsessed with these card sets, and I'm just obsessed with getting the right card set. So something about that. And write down the best possible version of yourself. And we've done this before too: an architect, a heart surgeon, and the worst. So write down those two things. And we're just writing right now. Best version of myself, I don't know, floating in space and not worried about anything. And the worst, buried alive. Let's just put those things down. I'll put those things down. That's mine, just so we'll see the examples going. So now we'll continue. On an index card, now we're going to doodle a little. We're going to draw these characters. Draw a self-portrait. And you may need to pause this. You may want to pause this. There's 6 of them, I think, here. After a self-portrait, draw a figure of authority. It could be a, police officer. It could be a boss. It could be any kind of, let your mind wander. An awesome version of yourself before, draw that. So I would draw that like cosmic floating self that I mentioned. Draw any monster or complete jerk, whatever you think that should look like. Draw that. Draw that sucky version of yourself, that thing that we said would be the worst case scenario. Draw that, and for me it's buried alive. Draw a complete innocent. What does that mean to you? Draw something completely innocent. And then give any one of those characters a mother or a boyfriend or girlfriend or any kind of family relationship. And then we're done. So, comics as life, this personal sort of approach I'm talking about. So how do we get started making a comic, or coming up, getting started, making a story, making a comic, whatever we want to call them? I think there are 3 ways. There's an image. I don't know if Chester Brown started this way, but this is a good image to start with. Ed, the happy clown, on his way to visit the sick children in the hospital. We can start with an idea. We've got the whole idea in our brain. Or maybe parts of it are the main part of it. It takes place in a certain world, of certain characters up against certain obstacles, stuff like that. Or we can start with a character. There's Happy Hooligan from our old-time comics. So right now, take one of your character drawings and on an index card, draw them doing something. Allow something vivid to pop in your mind, but it doesn't have to be that vivid. You can do mowing the lawn or scratching a pimple, but take one of those characters, one of those 6 people you drew, or whatever, monsters, animals, and just draw them doing something. That will be our image. And again, if you have to pause this, go ahead. I'm going to keep moving. So we start with an image. And here's another Ed the Happy Clown. Oh well, maybe I'll go visit the orphanage. I'm sort of back... reverse engineering this a little. This is Chester Brown. Ed the Happy Clown, a very vivid book, a very intense book, full of wild twists and turns. Let's imagine in this image it just says, maybe I'll go visit the orphanage. So what do you do with that image? And we've done this before in storytelling flow and created images in lots of ways. You can go backwards and figure out how that image came to be. I'm on my way to visit the sick children in the hospital. Sorry, Ed, the hospital burned down and everyone died except us doctors. Oh well, maybe I'll go visit the orphanage. So now we've backed up and we've gone forward. Or we go and we continue to go forward. Continue to work chronologically and imagine other images, other things happening. Maybe I'll go visit the orphanage. I've accidentally broken my leg. This image haunts me, which is why I've included it. I've accidentally broken my leg. And then you can keep going forwards. Imagine what happens next. Oh no, the rats. It's just incredible, weird, nightmarish. Okay, so do this too. Next to the image you sketched, write down 2 possible things that could have happened before, and write down 2 possible things that could have happened after. And we've done this before. This is just like the storytelling flow thing. So maybe we're getting practice at that. And continuing that, let's take a look at these random images. Pick one and pause if you need to. And then take one other image at random, one of those, and that could be associated with it. And then we're just assembling images and we're assembling sequences that can start to work. And eventually, I think with enough practice, your intuition takes over from the random accidents and it starts to impose some order. I say that's called writing a story. It is. So the third thing, the second thing, an idea. Like I said, you have like the whole world, maybe the whole character, maybe the whole character arc. You know what the character needs to overcome and stuff like that. It's the easiest thing to start with, but not always the easiest to finish and not always the most fun. And I say that because a lot of people come with very, very big ideas to classes, and they find it very hard to make the stories because their abilities are outranked by their idea. And so I think in a classroom setting, it's better to start off small, start off with images, start off with characters, and start off with things that we're thinking about personally and we're interested in personally and that are affecting us personally before we can make those big dreaming magnum opuses happen. But if you are, then you just got to do it. If you know your idea and your story, you just got to do it. Example, this was my best recollection of what the Matrix is about. I can't remember. Neo is a computer programmer who was called by a digital angel to take up the mantle of supreme guardian of the digital underworld. He is trained and must fight the evil army of the corrupt central computer processor, etc., etc., etc. Tactics here: you elaborate on your ideas, you work in drafts, you build up, and you finish. For a cartoonist, this tends to look like a plot outline, and I stole this from my friend Nick Bertozzi, who offered this to some of his students, a plot outline. The salon drives through town. This salon is a group of artists he's working with. They go from nice part of town to crappy. As they pass the police, P and B duck down in the carriage. You'll see who P and B are in a second. Then you script it out, and you can pause it and read this whole script, but now he's putting out the dialogue down. This is all page 98 from the salon. Rough it out. This is the carriage. There they are ducking down. You can try it again. He tried a couple different angles. He cropped in a lot tighter here, made it more impactful. Now we see the police in this new version, and we didn't really see the police in the previous version, so that threat is a little more exciting. So the second version here is really is where some of the better visual ideas came. Then you start to pencil it. You tighten up those roughs. Maybe you ink it. This is brush, but maybe you've got other ideas. Maybe maybe you color it. And hopefully at some point you have lettered it. He lettered this digitally after the fact. Sometimes that works. Sometimes I assume he planned it in the roughs ahead of time for lettering. I'm sure he did. Anyway, so that's another way. And third way is a character. You've got this character and you don't know what to do with it, or you have a million ideas for it. I've been there before. You need to give that character something to do and something to react to. Um, so here he is, the happy hooligan again. He's balancing this beam and this and this bucket of water or whatever. So that's him doing something, and he's reacting to the way that people are responding, and he wants to continue. We'll talk about how this becomes a story later, but maybe in the next one, the thing he wants to do is get a coin from a fountain. Maybe in the next one after that, what he wants to do is sell a bunch of stuff he found in the garbage, whatever. Give that character something to do, and especially something to want, and you've got the beginnings of ideas and stories. So here's a little, since we're talking about comic strips real fast, we'll talk about two people dynamics. This is Mutt and Jeff early comic strip, which didn't really talk about much in the history class, but it's one of the initial comic book versions of or comic strip versions of the two-person dynamic. And briefly, I'll just tell you that Mutt is always trying to make some money at the track, and he's always making Jeff do things like here he's digging up money, or here he's burying his money. Yeah, Mutt's telling him to bury his money. Jeff buries his money. Mutt steals it and goes bets on the track, etc., etc. Great two-person dynamic was Calvin and Hobbes. We'll talk a lot about two-person dynamic right now when we talk about status. This is something I learned in reading books by Keith Johnstone, who's an improvisation teacher. In every interaction, 99.9%, I would dare say 100% of them, there is a difference in status. In the Mutt and Jeff strips, Mutt is almost always higher status than Jeff. And the simple delight for this simple strip was in watching him sort of fool Jeff into another sort of farce, and then taking the winnings and betting at the track. So over and over again, you would see. So that dynamic was always the same. Mutt always had it over Jeff. He was the high status person for some reason. Calvin and Hobbes changed a lot. This is a great example where Calvin is high status in the beginning, but Hobbes fools him and pokes his balloon and wins. So that the constant reversing of status in Calvin and Hobbes was one reason it was so great. It was great for a gazillion reasons. Here's Moomin, Troll, and Sniff in the Moomin strips. Sniff always had some idea, and I was always getting Moomin to go in on them. Sniff was oddly higher status than Moomin a lot of times. Nancy and Sluggo reversed a lot, but I think Nancy tends to be more high status. The statuses change when there is some sort of alliance to be made. So here they are battling each other, but this third character comes in, help, a lady is in distress, and suddenly there's an alliance between the two characters. The statuses may or may not come into play later, but they become one unit for a little while. Again, Calvin and Hobbes. Now, if you think this is only comic strips, one of the great themes of Fun Home by Alison Bechdel is this reversal of status between Allison and her father. These moments where the father is confessing things, the places in which the father looked up to the daughter, confided in the daughter, was in some ways envious of the father, and she makes this two-person dynamic between the two characters extremely overt. I was Spartan to my father's Athenian, modern to his Victorian, butch to his Nelly, etc., utilitarian to his aesthete. And the last parts of the book are, if I remember right, this is the last part where she is again talking about this reversal. And it actually, you see it, they're moving right in this first part and then left on the last part. And some of the final moments of the book are about how she was made to hold a lot more of his personality than he could. So exercise 2. From your earlier list of the other yous, like that, the great self and the low self, who is low and who is high status? Obviously the high status one would be the best version of you, and the low status would be the low version of you. But can you imagine reversing them? In my instance, the buried alive person, could it somehow be more high status in a situation than the cosmic floating version of myself? It's a tricky one, and I'm not sure I can tease it out real fast, but it tends to be when the character wants something. The cosmic floating person wants something that maybe the buried alive person took with him to his grave, right? Maybe he's in his last breaths and he's still holding on to this thing, but the cosmic thing, I don't know. But already there's an idea there, and there's certainly something to entertain your imagination and to get you going. I'm going to take a moment and write that down. Still talking about status, your average low status, and by low I mean the lowest, as low as you can get, average low status person character is almost always comedic, and we laugh at them for the farces they get into because they're always being punished and humiliated, and they can't win. Barney Google was kind of an example of that. Happy Hooligan was definitely an example of that. Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, examples of that, Buster especially. And my sort of theory is that single low status performances in comic strips too are about virtuosity of performance. They're about farce. They're about outlandish antics that we watch that are more extreme and more of a loser. When you see a character who's more of a loser than you, there's a little bit of relief, right? But it tended to be in performance. It tended to become a place for virtuosic performances, and really outlandish drawing, ridiculous situations, like things that could never happen in real life. Here's a more modern version of these low status characters, Amy and Jordan from Mark Beyer. I don't even want to tell you what's going on. You can pause it and read it, but they're getting kicked out of their apartment. Oh no, they get kicked out later. Right now they're going home because we were rude to our friends at the party, but they'll probably speak to us again because in their minds we're a couple of lovable eccentrics. Well, anyway, they had a horrible time at this apartment. Poor Amy, Jordan, I always forget which one is which. One of their heads is starting to swell up for some reason. My head keeps getting larger and larger. It must be an infection that's set in, a complication that's a result of my surgery. I've got to get you in the hospital, but your head has grown so large I can't get it out of this room. These horrible things happen to these losers. They can't win, and they have a really, really dark, horrible time. Eventually, I should know these characters, Amy or Jordan. The other one lances the head of the other character, but the apartment now is filling up with blood, and it's they can't stay here. Amy, oh okay, so that's Amy, that's Jordan. Our apartment's been destroyed, and now there they are leaving town. When our landlord sees our apartment, we're really going to be in trouble. Low status characters, they can't win. Everything is going to happen to them. Things are going to keep getting worse. I like Kathy Geiswhite. I think she did a great thing and was such a long-lived cartoonist. But Kathy the comic, to me, it was never. I always wanted to see her. I wanted to see her situations be more outlandish, and there was something always like she didn't interact with people that much. It's almost like Kathy didn't want to see her lose too much. And Kathy's a very complicated world, but she was definitely low status, right? She was always put upon. She suffered from the media especially, and then her family to some degree. It's interesting. I've seen really good articles about Kathy recently where they talk about how it's both pro-feminist and anti-feminist at the same time. Anyway, that's our diversion one. Oh, let's talk about high status characters. Almost always the high status character is just a superhero. They can't be beaten. They're in charge always. What you need to do with that is give that character something to believe, think, worry about, need or want. Give either your low status character or your high status character that, and make it something that you believe in. Make it something you worry about, and that's a great way to make it personal. Calvin and Hobbes again. One reason it was so great is because Watterson had all these philosophical beliefs and ideas and curiosities, and when he infused Calvin and Hobbes into that worked really well. So, exercise 3, take the distraction you wrote earlier. I think my distraction was about noise, right? Yeah. I got to do this and be quiet, etc., etc. Take that distraction you wrote earlier and put it in a word balloon and place it over the head of one of your characters you created earlier. And in fact, I would say put that word balloon over every character just to see how it looks and how it feels and how it pops. And when we talked about how you have a sort of visual pulse, I think you'll see that different word balloons sort of pulse with a different character each time. So I can't believe I let my boss talk to me that way is one that I wrote in an earlier version. So I'm going to put that over the head of all these Miyazaki characters from Spirited Away. Gosh, Supergirl sure is beautiful. That's from a Chris Ware comic, and I'm just going to put that over the heads of these characters. And like it changes, if you put different, look at Chihiro saying, gosh, Supergirl sure is beautiful. But that longing look on her face is really interesting. Whereas this sheepish bird, I can't believe I let my boss talk to me that way, is really interesting too. And there we go again. This green, one of these green, face head characters. Gosh, Supergirl sure is beautiful. I can't believe I let my boss talk to me that way, that big baby character in the back. And you can just keep going like that forever. So if you've got 6 characters and you've got a word balloon, just test it out. It's really, really fun to do. And suddenly, like I said here on the bottom, characters are emerging with psychological traits drawn from your own interests, from your own obsessions and distractions and things like that. And you can imagine those, I can't believe my boss talked to me that way over any of these Calvin pictures or any of these Hobbes pictures. It's just another way to just keep ideas coming. Ideas surprise you all the time. Talking about obsession, it's another great way to create a character. Chris Ware created Rusty Brown, which just came out as a new hardcover giant story, but it started as an adult man simply obsessed with childish pursuits, toys, action figures, sci-fi movies, and comic books, and very low status, if not the lowest. And again, I think there was a certain sort of punishing quality Ware had to Rusty Brown. He wanted to punish the character a little bit, or he tormented him a little bit. But Ware is I think personally too compassionate a creator, and eventually that wasn't enough. And so over time, Rusty Brown grew into a complete 3-dimensional character with history and with real sad things, both in his past and his present. So I'll let you pause this, but there's that, gosh, Supergirl sure is beautiful. But yeah, he started off just as a toy collector, and a very certain kind of toy collector. Doesn't have any kind of other life. He cons his friend out of a lemon toy or something. It's to get the Supergirl. It's just silly. But it becomes a very, very deep dynamic. So it's a great way to begin, and that's one way of saying, when some of these ideas early on in their development don't feel like, oh, this isn't a good enough idea, this isn't blah, blah, blah. We just need to work with the idea a lot longer, weeks, months, years, maybe, before those ideas start to be like, oh, now they have some depth, now they have some humanity and some real feeling and some genuine originality, So one thing we need to do is work through those initial phases where the ideas are maybe seem not for us, or maybe not, or maybe just a little superficial or something. Obsession can be a meditation, and there can be there's great potential for comics that let you explore your own obsession. So I said mine was cards, right? So ideally, someday I would make some sort of tarot card reader as a character, but that tarot card reader isn't satisfied with the regular tarot and is always like altering it or something, and maybe that person is constantly ruining people's readings because I'm gonna make it a he because it's based on me, because he is overly hacked his own deck, something like that. You see some other examples here. If you are really interested in food, you can make your character, well, obviously you can make it a cook, but you could also make it a health inspector. If you're interested in death, you can make a forensic photographer. If you're interested in the human form, make your character a tailor, a dressmaker. How interesting would that be? Super interesting. Alienation, loneliness, confusion, an actual alien. I've seen plenty of types of comics like this. I remember one called Bob the Alien, totally silly, but it makes me laugh all the time.
Can you say something?
There's some examples called Julius Knipple by Ben Catcher, right? Ben is very interested in New York City. He's very interested in the very strange, odd corners and how the city works, but in the most micro level that is utterly obscure to everybody else. And so he created this thing called a real estate photographer, and that's Julius Knipple. And you see him sort of wandering the city, but really it's an excuse for Ben to talk about the post office after hours, or to talk about postcards. And I guess we're still talking about the post office here. Oh yeah, this is one strip. And to talk about the post office after hours, or here to talk about the sirens that you hear from various whistles and things like that, and to imagine what's going on and who's pulling those sirens, and he connects it to our own stomach sounds and stuff like that. Very interested in all the sort of things you never think about in a city. And so this character isn't really much of a character. He's a purpose, He's a stand-in that gets the story moving, so that Ben can explore his obsessions and present his findings. Jason Lutz, Berlin. Jason is interested in Germany and pre-war Germany and all these things, of course, but he's also super interested in words and pictures. And so he made one character a visual artist, and he made the other character a writer. And he also reversed them and made the artist draw on lined paper, and the writer writes on not lined paper. And it's just a game he sort of played with himself. And because he wanted Berlin to be about that history and characters and things like that, but he also wanted it to be about words and pictures. If you go back and read, especially those early pages, you'll see that. So from the previous obsession that you listed in the beginning, can you create a character that would let you, as a creator, explore that obsession? I mentioned my sort of tarot creator or character or something. Assign those traits to one of the drawings you already made. So if you've got those drawings, pick one up and say, that's my tarot reader, or that's my whatever, my real estate photographer, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about plot for a minute. Plot is about breaking routine. So broken routine is the beginning of plot. So I think we've seen this. This is Mr. O. There he is walking along. That's the routine. Nothing interesting about that. But when he can't continue, that's when it becomes a story. And plot builds from disrupted routines. And so that's how Louis Trondheim managed to make 40 pages of, I think, 90 panels. I can't remember. I did the math once. Maybe 60 or something panels on each page. Is he just he breaks the routine, and then he breaks it over and over and over again. The new routine is he's walking back, he sees a bird, he has some thoughts, but that everything gets broken and broken and broken and continued. We'll see another example of that or two. So this maybe I'll go visit the orphanage. We've seen this. Break that routine. He can't get to the orphanage. I've accidentally broken my leg. But even the routine of like, oh, I have a broken leg is completely disrupted by this, like, and 2 panels later. And that's what was so like vivid and horrific and nightmarish about this early Charles Chester Brown stuff is like there was no time to breathe before a new darker idea came in. So like, oh, suddenly the rats are coming and they've got this, it look like they want to eat them. Just found these 2 panels, random panels, one from Gasoline Alley, one from Zippy, 2 characters walking along. Zippy wandered the bustling streets of Times Square looking for something familiar and chewy. But in either case, I just want to see, I've accidentally broken my leg. That's the beginning of a plot. But it doesn't have to be that horrific. It doesn't have to be that like visceral, but something surprising, something breaking the routine. Disrupted routine. Routine is the beginning of any kind of story. Luke Skywalker's parents are killed. There's a murder on a train. Nicolas Cage decides to kill himself while drinking. So, like, you can go on drinking, that's the routine. But if he decides to kill himself, it's different. That's an old movie. The Goddess of War, this is a great Lauren Weinstein comic. The Goddess of War decides to go on strike. Or someone eats the office girl's lunch. That's an Enomoto story. It's at the end of this PDF. It's far too twisted to read out loud, but you want to download the PDF and find it. Or in Happy Hooligan's case, right? So the routine is, I've got this thing balancing, it's going well. Oh no, it's falling. And oh no, it's not just falling, it's falling on the police officer, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what you see in some of those early strips, those farces where the routine being broken and creating worse situation for the character than he or she started with. Calvin was always about, or Calvin Hobbes was always about breaking routines, and this is a classic one he would do all the time. The spaceman Spiff and blah blah blah, but that routine is broken, and he played around with that so much by showing that reality routine and imagination routine could not coexist, and so he got lots of mileage out of breaking one routine or the other. It can be the beginning of a plot of longer stories. This is 2 pages from Anna Summers' story called The Huntsman's Wife, I think. And you see it's just like a normal, she's saying goodbye to them as they go out hunting. They come back with a deer. Nothing super interesting there. Or not interesting, but nothing out of the ordinary. The story really begins is when they go out again the next day, and one of the hunters is killed by the other hunter, and then, whoa, the story gets dark and interesting. Julie Doucet, what an intense city. I'm in New York City. My friend's place is just on the street. All right, seems simple. The routine is that she would go to that address on that paper and everything would be fine, but instead, in Julie's world, this fire hydrant starts peeing on her, and everything starts ripping at her clothes and stealing her baggage and things like that, and Julie was sort of a master of the disrupted, nightmarish dream logic routines being broken, and then but it ends pretty happily when, if you've got a new routine, and that new routine is, I have no money, I have no clothes, I don't know where my friend is, then introduce like a talking mouse and have that talking mouse invite her over to a school pad and they have a drink. And that's how Julie would tell a story. So like the previous examples, once you get started, you just honor the ideas and images that attach them, and you're assembling. And again, developing that intuition is what we're hoping to do by practicing. So continuing on routine, and a diversion about that is, it's at the heart of most comic strips, is some sort of routine. So like Happy Hooligan, Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts, obviously. What you want in a comic strip is you want that routine disrupted, but not disrupted so much that it can't be repeated again. And when you've established personalities and status, you can explore the subtleties of the dynamic over and over and over again. Your average superhero gets, to me, a little outlandish, or is this Conan or something, and Spider-Man down below. the routine here, he's got to choose between two women, and here the routine here is like he's rescuing. I don't know if that's Gwen Stacy or anything, but he's looking for a frozen food locker. Why? Because it's unexpected and it's part of an interesting story. These are super old panels from old comics, but there's always the disruption of routine still, and that's how superhero plots are written, as well as high status ones and low status ones. Little Sammy Sneeze himself was the disruption in every comic strip. So the routine was kids are playing marbles. Well, he's going to sneeze and make a mess of it. Or there's a parade and it's got elephants, but he's going to sneeze and make a mess of it. The disruption was, and it's interesting because Little Sammy Sneeze didn't last too long, and it maybe is because it had a short life, because the character as disruption made it was pretty hard to deepen, I think, whereas Little Nemo has layers and layers and layers. Again, we saw that, talked about how that's a routine. Classic routine from Crazy Cat. Endless variations is what a comic strip is called for. So right now, exercise 4, imagining a continuing routine between two of your characters. Just imagine it and play around, repeat. I mean, I don't know, since I'm not drawing this on video right now, the only two characters I have are the floating cosmic one and the buried alive one. Is it that the buried alive one has always taken something, or you know what? Maybe the tarot reader is constantly trying to give a reading to the person who's being buried alive, but the person who's being buried alive wants out. I don't know. That's kind of crazy. I've gotten to the point where the crazier the ideas, the more I imagine they're probably truthful. So I'm going to write that one down about giving a reading to a buried alive person. It's pretty grim. But maybe there's something there. Anyway, imagine a routine. Imagine something that could happen over and over and over again. That's one of the exercises. So, in summary, it's like a classic PowerPoint, isn't it? Where at the end we have a summary and everything. Start from somewhere. Just start from somewhere. Idea, image, character. You know that old routine. The road to riches starts with the dime. And then work to fulfill, complete, and explore that beginning in as many ways as you can. Doodling, writing, sketching, talking. However you get more materials, fine. Just keep going. Push through. Add to it. Assemble. Push through that voice that says meh, that says it's not good, and just try and add just a little bit more to it. Store ideas, because they're everywhere. Come from and they come from assembling and combining ideas and images. Just like I'm really interested in this, like giving tarot readings to the guy who's being buried alive. Like I'm definitely going to write that down, and it came from nowhere, and it came from assembling and combining ideas. And be a character. This is where we tie it back into life. Repeat your best creative actions. Whatever is working for you, learn to repeat those. And don't disrupt your own creative routines, but do disrupt your self-sabotaging routines. So if you can recognize what it is that's keeping you from working or keeping you from acknowledging your own ideas or believing in them, find a way to disrupt those. Part of what the Ideas and Vision course is about trying to establish new routines to sort of break that critic, to sort of distract that critic, because you can never really break him down, but to create new creative routines that we get used to, like, oh, I've seen this work once or twice, I'm going to try it again, and to disrupt and confuse that critic a little bit. So real fast, that's the end, but real fast, the PDF has some things. That's the Enomoto story I mentioned. It's got a little bit about what Linda Barry does, but you probably know that by now. It's got some ideas about formal ideas, if you have them. It's got Julie's story again. So thanks for being here, and it's been great learning about how to create ideas with y'all, and I'll talk to you later.